of the City of St. John, welcome to each of you. Thank you for joining us on this rainy day. What better place to be than someplace dry and warm talking about a transformational project that will reshape our city. My name is Brent McGovern, and I'm from the City of St. John. In my role at the city, I'm Commissioner responsible for utilities and infrastructure. We're excited tonight to be able to give you a first peek behind the curtain into the Fundy Key project, and more importantly, to hear the ideas, your ideas on the future of our urban waterfront. The Fundy Key is a transformational project for our city and region. It will change the face of our waterfront for decades to come. The project totals $27.5 million in public infrastructure to protect our coastline and open the waterfront for public use. I'd like to take a moment to recognize both the federal and provincial governments who have committed funding of over $18.4 million to this important project, as well as to thank our mayor and council. The municipal contribution is just over $9 million. The investment is a catalyst for our uptown, for our city, and for our region. It has the potential to leverage more than $300 million in private sector waterfront development. I'd now like to shift the focus to speak more about tonight's event. The session, of course, is being hosted on Zoom. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to find the tech support in the chat box. You can message privately, or you can send a message to all attendees. We will be monitoring the chat for activity. We recommend that you switch your viewing settings to speaker view. You can choose between that or gallery at the top right of your screen. We kindly ask that you please keep yourself on mute when you aren't speaking. This helps to minimize any distractions. And we will have ample time for discussion after today's presenters. We will conclude today's session with a discussion in breakout rooms, and feel free to leave questions or comments in the chat box or raise your hand to let us know you'd like to come off mute. This can be done beside your name under participants. For your awareness, today's session will be recorded for our archives. Tonight's event is intended to be both informative and engaging. Both the city and the private sector developer will be providing some early information on aspects of the Fundy Key project. The city will also be looking for your feedback and ideas on how we can transform the public edge of the city's waterfront. There will be opportunities for discussion built into the session this evening, and I encourage you to share all of your ideas. If there's anything that you'd like to share following the event, please send it to publicfeedback@stjohn.ca. And you will see this address up on your screen at different times throughout the evening. Before we get started, I'd like to speak a bit about the municipal components of the project. Fundy Key project is comprised of both public sector infrastructure improvements and the private sector development. The public sector infrastructure projects focus on protecting the coastline from future impacts to sea level rise, while also addressing a deteriorated seawall, preparing the Fundy Key site for development, while also opening more access to our beautiful harbor and extending public access along the edge of the waterfront. So the projects include the repairing and raising of the seawall at Fundy Key, raising the elevation of Fundy Key site and addressing soil contamination in the process, reimagining of Loyalist Plaza, the extension of Harbor Passage, and building a pedway between Market Square and the Fundy Key. Many of these projects are still in design or engineering phases, with the exception of the seawall project. That was recently awarded at council, and the construction will begin in approximately 1 week. I would now like to move to introduce the developer and the architectural lead for Fundy Key Developments. Joining us this evening are Chris Elias of Fundy Key Developments and Sanaz Shirshakar. Chris Elias is a VP of Operations for Fundy Key Developments, and Sanaz is the architectural lead for Fundy Key Developments. Sanaz is an architectural consultant who relocated to St. John. She's worked on a wide range of transformational projects, such as 3C Waterfront Development Project in Toronto, the Pan Am Games at Athletes Village, the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal in Toronto, and the Harbor Square Park. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Chris. Chris, over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. And I'm also joined tonight by my colleagues in our internal team at Fundy Key Developments, Inc. That's Alex Elias, or VP of Finance, Wallace Floyd, VP of Development, and David Elias, President. So we're proud to be part of this project with the City of St. John, as well as with funding partners, provincial government and federal government. And the goal for the Fundy Key site is to re-engage our community and our visitors with the city's waterfront. So the redevelopment of this site, in our eyes, is not just a remediation of contaminated soil, but also a chance to really create what we believe and know will be an inviting interface for St. John and for visitors to have with the harbor. One that allows for recreation, cultural attractions and events, educational space, tourism, as well as increased residential density. So mixed use development within a historical context. Currently, the site plan, most of the density is planning on coming from mixed use residential and retail buildings. But we're continually assessing options for commercial, cultural, educational, and institutional buildings on the site. We feel that with our very fast-moving real estate market, that viability needs to be a cornerstone of this project. So with that in mind, the intention is to take a phased approach to make sure we're not bring too many buildings online all at once, and make sure that each phase is feasible based on current market conditions. And in doing so, we're collaborating with the City of St. John on how the Fundy Key site will fit within this overall revitalization project that includes the surrounding public space, as well as the rest of Uptown generally. So we're working closely, and we will be working through the planning and advisory committee, as well as with council, on determining some of the use components for the site, specifically to do with parking, ground floor uses. These are two considerations that will be addressed to make sure everything's in conformance with site requirements, as well as the Central Peninsula redevelopment plan, and also to make sure that the project fits within the spirit of Uptown St. John generally, and seamless integration with public space. So we're also very pleased to be working closely with the Glen Group during this design and engineering phase, as well as with the other stakeholders involved on the design of this public space. We feel that this is a really important element with this site. The Fundy Key site, as you can see, is surrounded by what will be newly reimagined public space. So our site's connectivity with that public space is a very important design consideration at this point. So our design team, led by Sanaz Shirshakar, is working with the Glen Group to assure that there's fluid transition and seamless integration between our site and the adjoining public space. So to speak more to some of the design principles and high-level design concepts, I'm going to turn it over to Sanaz now. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. The master plan for Fundy Key aims to enhance the waterfront and become part of the city's greater vision. After World War II, as many of you may recall, King Square became the center of the city. The waterfront was historically comprised of warehouses, Coast Guard station, and other enterprises associated with the working port. But in the late 80s, as the port and trade businesses evolved, a new vision for the waterfront took hold with the redevelopment of Market Square. Our vision is to take advantage of the stunning backdrop of the harbor, including the West Side Port and Partridge Island, combined with the dynamic seascape that is constantly rising and falling from the highest tides in the world. And of course, to further create a dense urban experience where you can live, work, and play, and never get tired of your surroundings. The vision is also inspired by retailers, restaurants, and offices, and residents that have most recently migrated to the waterfront area. Since the opening of Market Square, the vision has gathered momentum with the redevelopment of Water Street, Princess Street, and Canterbury Street. During this time, we saw the demolition of the old Pugsley terminals and the sugar refinery, replaced with condos and the new cruise ship terminal. Fundy Quay is about fulfilling that vision to bring the city to the waterfront and to tie together the Uptown and Market Square. The architectural mandate for the site will include design that draws inspiration from its context and proposes new construction that is relatable in height, massing, and style, while still being purposefully constructed to be buildings of its time. The building heights will vary, but will be carefully considered to maximize density while minimizing interruption to the surrounding context. This is an example, a relevant example of Hafen City, which is in Hamburg, Germany. Massing, proportion, and orientation. Massing will be carefully oriented, shaped, and proportioned using existing urban sightlines to maximize views to the water while enhancing the end user experience. The design and style. The architectural style will pay homage to the architectural context of St. John without trying to recreate or replicate existing buildings. Building finishes will be carefully selected and tailored in a sophisticated and sustainable approach. Again, this is another precedent example of Hafen City in Hamburg, Germany. The Fundy Quay Master Plan is based on goals and design principles that will ultimately render a coherent vision of high-quality architecture and complementary spaces, enhancing the urban realm, connectivity to its surrounding, and the water. The plan will contribute to the growing vision and revitalization of St. John's waterfront. We imagine the site as a gateway to future cultural and retail attractions and an urban destination. Once completed, this project will make a significant contribution to the transformation of St. John's waterfront into an accessible, inviting, and pedestrian-friendly realm. Thank you. I'll pass it over to Brent. Yeah.
Thank you, Sanaz. I would now like to introduce Dan Glenn of the Glenn Group, Landscape Architects and Planners. Dan is the design lead for the public space projects being undertaken by the city. This includes the revitalization of Loyalist Plaza, the extension of Harbor Passage, and the pedway connection between Fundy Quay and Market Square. Dan has more than 40 years experience in landscape design and has led the design for much of the St. John waterfront, including the Harbor Passage system. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dan. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank everyone for coming out this evening to share your ideas with us, to help us in this exploratory stage of the project. We've been working now for approximately a month. And in that time, we've met with a number of stakeholders, and we've been doing assessments of the site in terms of looking at the environment and the soils and the conditions that will set us up to develop schemes that are not only creative, but also realistic. So today, I'd just like to go through a bit of a description of the project so that it's clear. And I know Chris had just sort of identified for you the project, but we see the project as really three parts. One is this orange square here, which is Loyalist Plaza and Market Slip. The two are interconnected. And the second is Harbor Passage extension that will extend from Water Street around the periphery of Fundy Quay and then go through Loyalist Plaza and connect to the boardwalk and then on to Harbor Passage, which goes out towards Reversing Falls. Also within the scheme is a pedway that will connect Market Square to Fundy Quay. When we look at projects, we like to go backwards first to make sure that our designs are founded on the cultural assets and as well as looking at how we adapted to change over the years. So it's no different here. This space has been used prior to this picture, which is 1863. The site was used primarily the same way for over 100 years. So the progress was not as quick as it's been in the last 100 in terms of a change. But this is a wonderful environment here with, you can see the busy activity in the slip, and how the slip at one time came all the way up to Water Street at the foot of King Street, where these horses would have been lined up with their sloven wagons here where they're low to the ground, making it easy to transport goods in and out of the boats. You probably recognize some of the stores there. I know like King Cole is one. And the site was used at the turn of the last century for celebrations such as the Champlain celebration. And we've seen many of these types of celebrations, since that time. So we know this space is very important as a gathering space to the city. Also a very important space for commerce over the years as we move from the 20s and into the 30s with the streetcars and these granite cobbles that were once in the tracks now form some of the walking surfaces within Loyalist Plaza. This is probably the first traffic circle in New Brunswick at the time, at the foot of King Street. As cars and vehicles started to be common day activities here, you can see fewer and fewer boats lined up on the slip. Even in the 50s and the 60s, coal was still a big part of the slip here in terms of transporting in the boats that were fueled. A wonderful view up King Street here, and you can see the strong connectivity between King Square and Loyalist Plaza. The other thing that's worthwhile noting is that in the past, there were many slips that lined the waterfront. Currently, this would be the formation pretty much of the Fundy Quay site. And you probably didn't know that St. John invented the first low tide parking lot. And it was a short-lived venture, about 6 hours. So we don't see this type of activity carrying on at the site. By the time we got into the late 70s and 80s, you can see that economic transformation was not kind to Market Square. And there was a renewed optimism brought about with a project to change things at the site. And in the early 80s, there was new life brought to the space with a small plaza for small performances, a tugboat, and green space. One of the things you might notice with this scheme is how open the site is. And when you look from the delta up, there are clear views up the street and clear views down the street to the water, only interrupted by these terraced settings of armor stone to create that pool. Today, with the relocation of the Coast Guard site, the opportunity is with us again to revamp this site and to reimagine how it could be developed to become a facility that really is adapted to the needs of the current population. And that's focused on bringing more people downtown, creating neighborhood activities, making it desirable for people to go to this space and for it to be their backyard park, in effect, as well as a tourism destination. And it's time. The site has passed its life cycle age. The materials are deteriorating. It's being overgrown. It's being populated with all kinds of unconnected elements that make it kind of a clutter. And it's hard for people really to understand what this place is all about. Does it really represent everything the city, could be? So we have this great opportunity now to relook. If you remembered that view up King Street and what it looks like now, it's nice to have the trees, but you can see there's not much of a view. One of the things that's tremendous here is the opening up of this view across the harbor that most people have never experienced. So Harbor Passage will be a strip that runs around the edge of the wharf face, approximately 9 meters or 30 feet wide, and it'll be a combination of walking your Cranberry Trail, lighting, places to sit, landscape, little performance areas, and then behind that there will be a transition space into the buildings, which, as Alex was saying, that Chris was saying, sorry, that the building of that will take a number of years. Back in 2013, we went through a similar process here where we met with the public and received some ideas and developed a scheme. But back then there was a different agenda, there was a different budget. And so we're basically starting over, but we are going to use some of those ideas that were presented back then. And one of the things that was revealed to us back then, and it's also true with the stakeholder meetings we've had to date, is that there's a need to have better views to the waterfront, to open it up. The planners refer to this as porosity, that while we want to respect the historical building facades, people want to look to the future. They want to see something more modern. They want the space to be more flexible, more multifunctional. They want it to be attractive to families to come and have something to do there, a place to go for both passive and a little bit of active recreation. They'd like to see more green elements. They'd like to have better access to the water, better connections, things to do, with an abundance of places to sit. So there's lots of versatility, that there are spaces for all different types of programming of elements, whether they're permanent events that go on or whether they are temporary pop-ups, and that there's also the opportunity to tell the stories of St. John. Another thing we do with projects like this is we look at what's happened in other places, because we can learn from those. And we refer to these as precedents. So I have a number of slides here I'll go through rather quickly. And the idea is not to say we're going to copy these. And you'll realize that some of these projects are larger scale or smaller scale than the project we're looking at. But it's just to help you imagine the types of things that could be just by using some creative thought process. So whether it's a hard surface plaza or whether it's something that is more of a balance of green and hard surfaces that's multifunctional, or whether there's spaces that allow the water to come in with boats and activity, or places that might have terrific look-offs built into them where you get terrific views, or little nooks that are green areas that may have a place for children to play or a sculptural element. But one of your favorite places could be that small spot. A spot where you can go and get something to eat or drink, a place where you might get into the water, a place where you can get some shelter from the fog and the omnipresent wind we know that goes through the site. A design that allows us that continual flow from King Street down through the space, perhaps sprinkled with a bit of landscape, and a way to address that water's edge. How do we terrace down to really appreciate the tide, which is the highest tide in the world and is a phenomenal opportunity. And this is a great spot to show it off. You know, we had talked in 2013 about doing something similar to what was built here at Falls Creek in Vancouver, this idea of terracing down to the water. And we did this just, yesterday. We walked over the rock that's there today down to low tide, and a couple hours later, it was above the rocks. Larger communities, larger spaces. What most cities are realizing is they need multifunctionality. They need places that can be appropriate for small groups as well as very large groups. Places realize that we need to bring nature back into these places, especially if they were industrial. So there's certainly a movement out there to regenerate some of the waterfront with natural environments or forgotten places, abandoned spaces such as New York, the High Line, places where you have variety of sitting and interesting landscape that can be seasonal, and a place that can also be all season in terms of activities. Places that allow you to make transitions in the grade down to the water, or bring the water actually into the site, or bring the water in an imaginary way to the site as well, such as in Toronto. Places that might have sort of fanciful artistic expression, you know, whether it's Copenhagen or whether it's the wonderful bridges that were designed as part of Toronto's urban waterfront. Places that have islands of landscape that flow through to the water and allow the pedestrians to work their way, or just a spot to lay in the sun with a bit of greenery. And oddly enough, you know, St. John is a pretty sunny city if you look at the numbers. Also a place for large groups to collect for those special events, whether it's pop-up or whether it's infrastructure that allows you to have a large organization. And to realize that the site has to change at night. It needs to come alive at night. So making sure that we have effective lighting, that it not only is safe, but also becomes a form of the entertainment. We can animate the space with water, with sculptural elements. They can be fanciful, or they can be more of a organic and natural element. We want to make sure we have opportunities for children. And one of the things that's been effective in some large cities are little pocket beaches, or places where people can go and really appreciate the fact that they're near water. And we know that opportunity is rare in St. John. One of the things that has been talked about is a pedway. And so you may ask, why a pedway? Why is that important? A pedway is part of the funding agreement, and it's a separate piece of money, and it's there to improve the active transportation and the accessibility of the city. It's there to improve the opportunity, if there's a future hotel, to have connectivity over to the Trade and Convention Center. It's there to ensure that the vibrancy of Market Square in terms of a business opportunity can take full advantage of a new neighborhood that's about to be built across the way. That it provides optimization of the underground parking and surface parking that is across the slip. It's viewed as a catalyst to improve the fast build capacity of Fundy Quay with this connection. And also it's there because it can provide new opportunities in terms of views and experiences that can help tell the story of St. John. So we looked at a number of precedents and ways to go about this pedway, and we looked at pedways that were underground, we looked at pedways that were on ground, we looked at pedways that were bridges, and we looked at pedways that were enclosed. And we assessed all of them in terms of very technical requirements, and the results can be summarized as thus: that we feel it's going to be much less costly to go overhead than it is to go underground in this site, because of the number of pipes that are in the ground, because we have a site where the tide comes in, because there's not a solid bottom. It gets quite expensive and a technical challenge to go underground. So going underground brings about a high degree of constructability risk. So less risk with something overhead. It was viewed underground as being something that might be less safe and not as convenient. And that if you went underground, you're going to be at the lower level, not popping up into a commercial level. Whereas overhead, you would be on the second floor and probably come into the atrium space there by the library. Being underground, the views are pretty limited. In previous schemes, we tried to include windows, but in reality, at high tide, water is going to be up over your view. With an overhead pedway system, you've got great opportunities to look up King Street and to look across the slip. Another concern was, would a overhead pedway system really obscure views, and where an underground doesn't? And so we did some preliminary modeling. Now, these are not designing a pedway, but it's looking at a previous model that we had worked on for the space. So the buildings you're seeing here on the left at Fundy Quay are an old development scheme, not part of the new one. And on the right is Market Square. And what we were looking at, if there was an overhead pedway, it does not block the view of the water from the edge of the plaza, nor does it block the view of the water from King Street. It does create, you could have something that's fairly transparent, but it does cross your view plane. But it doesn't appear to be significant. If you're in the plaza, you'd certainly have views under the overpass, right over to, you can see the Harbor Bridge, and you're looking directly at Fort Latour and to Long Wharf in this view. And then if you were at the hotel looking backward, you might see something like this. Now, of course, again, this pedway has not been designed. We just put basically a box in here and modeled it to get an idea of height and space requirements. In the previous schemes that we had worked on, a tunnel came from here underneath and connected over here. with an overhead, we have the ability to leave the water face where it is and not bear the cost of putting in another seawall at the end, and possibly create a greater area for terracing up to the plaza, or bring the plaza down a little more to the water. A pedway doesn't have to be just a glass box. I mean, there are opportunities with lighting and things you could do to make it very interesting. Jeff had talked about opportunities for information or big screens such as the Nova Center in Halifax. There's great opportunities here to do something very sculptural, or things that change from daytime to nighttime, such as this one in Calgary. With our proposal, we had identified some preliminary ideas in terms of things that could happen. This is the Fundy Key project, Market Squares over here. But basically, these were just introductory ideas in terms of trying to create more space in the middle as an open area to the plaza, and then create opportunities at the corners and in the middle as places where they might be appropriate for gathering. Introducing cultural elements, such as maybe marking where the old slips used to be. The focus, we thought, really should be on the tide change, and that would be a major element, but also linked to programming. So we realized there needs to be a strong program of permanent and flexible programming, so that the site is able to be sort of a stage for any play. We're also looking to close the gap in Harbor Passage. So looking for a way to bring Harbor Passage through the site and connect it to the boardwalk in a way that this becomes kind of the ground zero for Harbor Passage. It's the way we've always imagined it. We would see some sculptural elements and some heritage elements and framing of views. Introduction of a multitude of different types and forms of seating and places to sit by yourself or with a group or watch a small performance. Places that might terrace down, because the seawall that's in there is going to be up 2 meters higher than it is now. The building pad will be up high as well. Terracing down so we can get some nice views and interaction with the water. These are some effective images of ways to bring in some landscape elements and playful sculptural elements as well. So at this point, what I'd like to do is open this up so that we can learn from you. So we're going to break off into 3 rooms, and I will be in one room. Jen Allen from our office is a senior landscape architect with us. Will be in another room, and the other room will be Nadine Lowe's, a landscape designer with our firm. They're both very familiar with this project, and they're going to lead you through a few questions, but more importantly, we want to keep the conversation going. So this is the opportunity. We want to learn from you as much as possible. So, and then we'll come back together as a group after this session, and we will prepare a summary of what was told in each one of these sections, and we'll see how similar or different the thoughts were. So with that, I will turn it over to the room breaker.
Okay.
I can hear you perfectly.
Wonderful. To be honest, in terms of the placemaking, it's everything I could imagine. Of course, some of it looks like some of the concepts are still in play, so it's hard to understand exactly what the space will look like when I think we're being showed some inspirations, but certainly the inspirations are fantastic. Probably the peak of what I was imagining could possibly exist, to be fair. So my bigger thoughts are about building placement. We saw a brief shot of the very tall tower. That looks like a good placement. Is there a greater sense of where the buildings will be, the envelope connection to the some of the active and passive spaces, and sort of where sunlight will move through, views will move through, and shadow and that kind of thing?
Brian, that's a good question, and it's too early in the planning process for Fundy Key to really say for sure.
Like to keep. They don't have to be literal. They can be programming type ideas. So if you just want to unmute your screen if you have a comment, then I think that's how we will go about it.
Hi, Jen, it's Glenn
Hi.
Hicks here.
Hi.
Make a couple comments. So just for context, I have a business that is on Prince William that actually it's U Station, and we have rooms, and our concourse faces this waterfront. Like we're right, I don't know how to explain it. We're we're above the Gahan House.
Okay.
Just for a reference point. So we're really excited, very excited about it, even though the potential for things to go in front of our view. I think our members will still really enjoy that because it's progress, and I'm sure it'll be done with, there's still lots of peaks and things to see from the waterfront. So we're really excited. Just a couple of thoughts. One of the things that's really enjoyable is the gatherings down on Market Square, like with there's music and things like that. It just really generates a lot of energy. So if we get more of that, a widening of that or something, so that because it can get, if you don't get a seat in the
you see these large open plazas in the slide deck, and you don't really see anyone in them. You don't really, it seems like it's more of like a statement to be like, look at this big cavernous open space that we have between, whatever might be along the sides of it. But I think maybe taking more traditional square design, like you see in King Square and Queen Square, as well as their counterparts on the west side, into effect could be beneficial. And regarding what the gentleman before me was saying about the volleyball court, I've never touched a volleyball in my life, and I don't really pay any attention to it, but it's nice to have it's kind of a weird thing to have in the middle of your downtown. And instead of looking to places like Hamburg or faceless Midwestern cities, maybe we should try to keep a couple of the weird things that actually draw people to the area, because they finish the volleyball game and then they all fill into the bars and or go get something to eat somewhere. So it's a good vibe to have. And even if they are in an awkward space, and I understand why the city wants to use that for views and to promote more interaction with the water itself, but there is enough real estate where there's nothing too exciting happening currently. So in the center city area, where the city should at least temporarily relocate volleyball courts to, it's a cool thing to have downtown. And if it goes away,
those of you who are familiar with Gahan House in St. John, we are fortunate enough to activate Loyalist Plaza with a beer garden this summer. And we found it a very good exercise in getting people outdoors and trying to create a communal space for everybody. And I think it was pretty well received. Most people who came down to the beer garden enjoyed it. We only operated to about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, so we didn't cause a scene, I don't think, for anybody. We weren't crazy, dog friendly, still family friendly. And it was just really nice to have people in a space where we didn't see it being used very much. And I think that's, a lot of people's vision here for this new waterfront space, is it getting used, you know, having people come down to the space, whether walking their dogs or going for coffee or catching a small concert or just sitting in some sun or catching a beer. I think that's what everyone's goal for the space would be.
Great, thanks, Ben. Brian, yeah, go ahead.
Actually, that was a great point. I don't know if that beer garden was specific to a COVID initiative and whether it's going to persist or not, but I believe that might be an opportunity as well. You noted a lot of slides from Vancouver, and I understand that Greater Vancouver has parks that have been specifically designated as alcohol friendly. I'm not sure exactly which municipalities, and I realize it requires cooperation from the province, but it meets a need, in particular with the COVID. We're in a position where we need to provide people who live in small condos places to be. And if we, how do you say that? Provide spaces where they can enjoy things safely, we can mitigate all the impacts of COVID. I wonder if that might be integrated within this placemaking around the buildings as well.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not seeing everybody here. Is there anybody else that has a comment about current use or events they'd like to see planned there? Speak up. Okay, so Stacy, I'm going to pick on you. What kind of events? Well, I guess maybe it's not a fair question because you haven't been there for a non-COVID time, have you? So, but what are your thoughts on events that happen outside at the space?
Well, can everybody hear me? Probably. Put your hand up now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to have the music and everything happening right outside. And I think that should continue on for sure. And it supports the patios at Market Square, which is important for business. And it would just be great to have it continue on that way. I love the concept of having more activity and more access to the harbor passage, and that would increase when we do get the cruise ships back in 2022. It'd be great to have them walking through the harbor passage from the Marco Polo terminal to Market Square. So I think when we get buskers back on the bay, that'd be great, and we could utilize that space even more for events such as that. So yeah.
I just wanted to speak up and mention that a couple of people are using the raised hands feature and are very diligently waiting to speak up, I think. So
Okay,
No,
I'm not sure if you can see that. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that because they're being quite patient.
I appreciate that because I got to find a way here where I can see everybody all at once. Because I'm just
I think it's Andrew Miller. Andrew Miller and Ann McShane.
Okay. Andrew.
Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I guess just on the activities and just I guess the first question as well, happy to see that obviously you're taking some guidance from Plan SJ and the recent Southern Peninsula Neighborhood Action Plan, which I was involved in. And so, giving access to harbor passage as a priority and access for people is great. And so, and the question that you were just asking as far as events, one of the challenges, of course, has always been in trying to make it accessible for the businesses that have restaurants and stuff on the harbor front there, and then the balance for the people that come to see those activities. And right now, traditionally, we've funneled everybody down in, and it's not been a great experience for for everyone necessarily. It's so something that tries to address so that entertainment can still happen, without the strange mixtures of everyone kind of being all funneled in together. It would be certainly something I'd like to see looked at or expanded out or redesigned better, because that's always been an issue where you know, mishaps tend to come out of.
Yes, no, I hear you. And the other person that's been trying to get on is
Ann McShane.
Ann.
Hi, yeah. The only thing I would add, it looks great. I love the terraced access to the water. I really like how that comes down. Four season activities, I guess, is the only thing I would request. And
Since you bring up the issue of a four season space, do you have any ideas to contribute besides the Nathan Phillips Square? Do you have any other examples that come to mind, perhaps?
I do. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, Moncton and Dieppe did some skating rinks that are cooled so that they can be open, even though the weather is interchangeable.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as any other ideas I have around the Four Seasons, you know, winter's always a hard one. The obvious one is skating, but you know, I think there's something there around considering accessibility in the winter, and
Yes.
even if it is a somewhat enclosed, I'm just thinking out loud, like an amphitheater-ish, indoor-ish, you know, viewpoint that connects to other things. Just as far as an open space that can be covered. Yeah, there obviously it can change the scope pretty dramatically once you start into, you know, a removable covering or whatever. But yeah, just considering, you know, as the design proceeds, you know, how is this a space that we can see the view still, but have some cover from the winter? And is it public? I guess those would be the questions I would bring up, and the possibilities there.
Yeah, and like you then said, you know, there's some repetition, I think, that I'm consistent.
We did a survey with immigrants as to why they chose to live in St. John. And we, as the locals, expected that their answer would be things like affordability and safety and cost of living and all that sort of thing. And their number one answer was nature and parks and the access to the water. So when you think of people coming, and it's not just international people, it's people from other provinces or other cities in the province, those are the things that are attractive: the access to the water, the access to being active and doing things outside. So it's an interesting thing to think about that from the perspective of people that don't live here that are noticing that.
Yeah.
I just want to throw out there that it'd be really cool if somehow we could work in food truck festivals into the space, because parking's already a little bit tight uptown anyway. But if there's some way to have like a planned space for food trucks that doesn't congest uptown, that would be pretty cool.
That would be cool. I do have to jump in though. I've tried to organize things with food trucks before. And the one challenge with food trucks is that they all have to expel gray water, which is a bit of a challenge. So if we can figure out what to do with their water expulsion, that's why for Uptown, it ended up being at Tin Can Beach in the parking lot. And then other places, it goes over to McAllister Place and stuff like that, because they're dealing with their water that they expel. But I agree with you, and I do want to eat the food from the food truck.
Yeah, and that's all something that we can kind of look into the technical aspects of later as we design. But just hearing that there's interest for that, maybe it's not food trucks, maybe it's other small vendors, you know, there's lots of things that we could do there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and I think the concept, all these weird little pocket spaces around the outside edge, those will end up like just underutilized and would probably be better served as landscaping or open viewing area. And I think having a kind of large focal area that's like a better laid out version of the, you know, occasional outdoor concerts on Rockaway or whatever it's legally called now, because it seems like, you know, they redevelop it and then they don't build a covered bandstand, and then over the years of somebody throws a bandstand up and then somebody, you know, it ends up happening anyway. I think this is like, I'm 29 and I think this is like the 4th iteration or major reconstruction of the bandstand that's in use there. It allows bands to perform in weather that's not as pleasant. I'm sure there's a way to actually make it more permanent and part of the site with a covered facility like that weird red roof shed that's there currently, but actually like, you know, incorporated better into the area. But I think a covered stage is a priority.
When you say
Are there any other comments about events or activities?
It's Andrew Miller again. Just
Yes.
to follow up. Obviously this project's going to be staged over multiple years. And I guess the question is that in that interim periods, will there be an attempt to try and green or make the spaces that aren't being developed still usable so that they're functional before the full kind of vision is built out?
Yeah, Andrew, that's a valid point, and probably is the answer. It needs to be worked out. There's going to have to be a whole strategy put in place in terms of space that's going to be allocated to lay down areas to facilitate construction, space that may be allocated for parking in terms of revenue generation. There may be spaces that are developed in terms of creating a landscaped edge. This will all take place over the next couple of months. But we would hope that we don't have a beautiful harbor passage edge that is tied up to a demolished site. So that's not the intent. We'll make sure that we have good integration. Jeff, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can comment, and I'll just apologize that the dog's fighting here. Yeah, so in terms of kind of the plan schedule, the good news is, you know, the public infrastructure is all under signed.
To have that pedway and that interconnection, and that's great for the tourists coming in as well. And one other thing that in watching a council meeting the other night, and Gary Sullivan's on, and he can maybe go into it in a little more detail, but there was a presentation by, and I can't remember the exact name, Accessible MB or something like that. And we really do have to keep in mind the accessibility of all of the features along the waterfront for people who are mobility challenged. And she pointed out the woman who was giving the presentation at the time, and it really made me stop to think that, you know, with a lot of the cruise ship visitors who are coming in, they go on cruises when that does come back. They go on cruises because it's easy for them to get around. And we should be promoting our city as being that as well. So I think that that's something that should be up on the priority list, even more so than you know, just meeting code kind of thing. I think there's an opportunity there. Those are just a few of my thoughts just off the top of my head as we're going through the presentation.
No, that's wonderful feedback. Thank you so much, Gary. Okay, next up, I'm not sure if we have Burger 1 or Burger 6, but whichever burger is here, we'd like to hear from you. If you can just take your mic off mute. There we go.
Am I Burger 1 or 6 speaking?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know why I'm Burger 1 or 6. My name's Corey McGill.
Okay, your name shows up as Burger 1 and 6 on the screen.
I was wondering who that was the whole time, and now I guess it's me.
So Gary McGill.
So it's Corey McGill.
Corey McGill, sorry, thank you.
And I'm the owner of McGill's down on Market Square.
Okay.
And so I wear a couple different hats. I'm the owner of my establishment, and I'm also the president of the North Market Wharf Cultural Association.
Okay.
We are the group that finances and programs the Boardwalk stage for the entertainment series each year.
Okay.
So I'm not going to talk about that today. I just wanted to quickly, because I know there's a few other people who want to speak, I wanted to speak towards the pedway. And the option that's being presented as the above ground pedway, where it does land in Market Square, we're not 100% sure on.
Right.
But from what we've sort of been kept in, because we've been a stakeholder in meetings for several months on this now.
Yep.
And in our view, the skywalk going into Market Square may be the best option for us, because we are going to have to live in a construction zone for the next couple of years.
Right.
And after coming out of the COVID 2020 and 2021, we've all been pretty heavily decimated financially. We've all had to lay off all of our staff for an extended period. And during high season combined, we look at 150 different people who work there, who all have families as well. So whatever action does come in for the pedway, which connects Fundy Key to Market Square, we would like the option that is the quick.
So, you know, the redevelopment of Rainbow Park is awesome. So finding a way to incorporate the spaces that already exist that are, you know, nice, and extending the Harbor Passage would obviously be incorporated into that, I'm sure, pretty easily. But yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it, is just making sure those leisure activities. So whatever those need to be, you know, the skating rink is a great idea, but unless you're going to lay down pipes to be able to like cool that and like actually have guaranteed ice every year, it doesn't make sense. So potentially doing that, you know, that's a great community activity. And the more of those we can incorporate, the better. I think utilizing those front two blocks, especially around the immediate waterfront, is pretty essential to get a nice boardwalk, kind of like Halifax. It's very maritime-y. That's what we are, Maritimes. You might as well show it off. And throwing a bunch of really large-scale buildings in the way isn't really my idea of what St. John is at the moment. I'd hate to lose that aspect of it. I'm great with large developments, just move them further back.
Okay, great.
The idea of a splash pad for kids or having children's activities is also wonderful. When we've been to other cities, and even here in St. John on the west side or whatever, and kids are playing in splash pad, that just raises your spirits. I mean, they're having so much fun and they're playing and they're getting wet, and you know, it's a great draw for families too, which is another way to add vibrancy to the uptown.
I would just add one other comment of, you know, no matter what the activity is, that the area can be used and is appreciated in daylight as well as evenings, so that it doesn't turn into this.
Way back to, you know, colonial times, let alone all the loyalist things we have going on. So seeing some landmarks that really hark back to that history is obviously something that I'm keen to see.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal history. And that's one of the things we've tried to do with Harbor Passage, you know, at every opportunity. And there's no shortage of stories to be told. That's the wonderful thing. Anybody else have a favorite or something we should look at?
I
Brian?
particularly like a lot of your slides from Vancouver. That False Creek area was very much like some of the older parts of the Port of St. John. And as a teenager, I had the benefit of going to Expo 86 in Vancouver along False Creek there.
Yeah.
And saw the subsequent redevelopment over the years as I became a young adult. And it's continued to grow over the years.
Before they head upriver. And one of the things I noticed, you know, in Yarmouth, Digby, Chester, you know, just other ports when you pull in, is there's a multi-purpose space. You know, it's not all about bands and entertainment. It's about chili cook-offs and art shows and flea markets and whatever. Just things that people are drawn to the water, but unfortunately, Loyalist Plaza is quite tired, and I keep There are gazebos everywhere, gazebos and grass, but it's just, they're multi.
And stay in return because they're beautiful.
I agree completely with Elizabeth. It's having opportunities for seating. I think when we think of our senior population and the people that are living again down at York Point or Harborside, people that, you know, soon the City Hall building is going to be condos. We know that's happening with Historica. Those people potentially will be heavily seniors, having the parking lot attached, the pedways. For them to be able to sit and look out at the water is a quality of life thing for sure, and for other people too, but specifically that demographic, we have to be realistic that a large percentage of St. Johners are seniors, and I also think that having, you know, greenery and having those elements, I mean, that is, everybody's doing those trends. I'd be shocked if that wasn't part of the plan already.
I mean, we haven't designed this.
Okay.
So we've
Yeah.
only designed it in the past. This session is our info gathering session before we get into design. So
okay,
it kind of looks based on the renderings like we've already designed it, but that was past plans.
Sure, I understand. So there are some trees that are currently there, sort of by the pop-up park is now on the other side of Loyalist Circle. So those are some pretty old and tall trees. It would be wonderful if they could keep them. I would definitely love to put that in as a comment. But yeah, there's some of the waterfronts that we've seen, you know, Portland, Maine is often comparable to St. John. And when we're there, you always look and see and say, oh my gosh, look at these buildings, look at this front of the harbor. It's very similar to St. John. And so they've, the work that they've done in their restoration, and again, the seating, the influence of trees and grass and flowers and plants and the things that they have around their harbor is lovely. Vancouver also has an amazing harbor with many things going on. And Halifax as well, you know, that great big wave, it's pretty iconic. People know immediately when they see that picture that that's Halifax Harbor. And of course they have all their special things that that's on the Pier 1 or Pier, I can't remember what it's called, but 21. Pier 21. Yeah.
I forgot the name as well.
So I don't know if you can see this or not, but I can't really see if it's on.
Yep, sure.
So this is an amazing book.
Okay.
It's Who's Your City? And it's written by Richard Florida. And it's how the creative economy is making where to live the most important decision of your life. So this has been an amazing book. And he is a great author at putting into perspective what are the important aspects of a city, a creative city that draws people here to stay, to live, to enjoy, and draws people here to visit.
Oh, for sure. I'll look into that. I wrote it down. Does anybody else have any city?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Portsmouth, New
So,
Hampshire.
would you have to go first, or?
No, I'll just throw it out there. It speaks for itself.
Okay, so one city that I would recommend is Nelson, British Columbia. It's a city of about 10,000 people. They've got a great big waterfront park that has some of the biggest, most beautiful trees I've ever seen. And
something that's just, it's not very big, but it's just surprising that there's that kind of an emphasis. And to your point, Ben, one of the things that we've talked about as a committee is the branding. You know, at some point in time here, what are we going to call this space? It's sort of called now, the top of it's referred to as Loyal's Plaza. Then you've got Market Slip, Fundy Key. So is it time for a new brand? And how do we determine that? Or will it come out of the design? Like, is it time to change the name with the new development? Any thoughts on that?
Something easier than Fundy Key that everybody says wrong.
Yeah, I know. I'm the only one that says Fundy Quay, and I have to keep my hands slapped.
You're not the only one.
Okay. I have two other
just-
questions here. Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's Andrew there again.
Yes,
Just
Andrew.
on the green space in that larger area, surface parking has obviously occupied a lot of current space there. And, in the recent plans, whether they be the peninsula plan, there's been an awareness that, street diets and building parking garages, that could potentially be repurposed in the future as our driving demand for cars and stuff shift and change. So I guess the question is more, looking at the site to
Until we get pulled back into the room, I would love to hear if anybody has any ideas of or comments on other waterfronts that you may have seen or been to yourselves that stand out to you and what you like about those waterfronts. So things that opportunities that we can consider for this space. I see. Yeah, Guylaine?
Well, I know like in Quebec, they have ways to connect through the water, people that are pedestrians. So it'd be nice if the North End could have access by foot or by somehow somewhat water. I really like the idea of having people coming by boat from other towns and other places,
So connecting not just parts within the city, but actually connecting other people to the city.
Yeah.
That's cool. I see hands up for Nick and Corey, and I'm not sure if that's just from before or if one of you has an additional comment, by all means, unmute. Any other waterfronts?
I personally really like the Halifax Waterfront. I know probably a dirty word to say that here, but I used to spend a lot of time there. Yeah, I always enjoy walking the waterfront, but also kind of the food and eating vibe that's typical. And there's typically lots of people mulling about and
idling in front of this festival space. I mean, I live uptown. I mostly walk, but I do have a car, and you always feel like kind of a dick when you're sitting in traffic on Water Street facing up St. Patrick's.
You've just you just should.
Sorry, keep going there.
Yeah, and you're idling. There's two cars with burning oil in front of you, and there's people crossing the street in pedestrian crowds. So maybe a sort of smoother, more efficient traffic flow at the bottom. I know the Barber General Store is only where it is currently temporary again, in case that office tower expands, because that is a site the city's got its eye on for development. So I think a traffic circle, maybe with greenery in it, would be a good feature just to keep emissions from kind of clogging the site and having everyone have to run through traffic.
Okay.
My only comment about green elements, generally I think it's a positive way to soften the space, but only if it's going to be properly manicured and maintained.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention about maybe rooftop gardens, depending on the height of what the buildings will be.
Okay, I'm running out of space. Okay, great. If that is everything for that, I am going to move on to question 6. Oh, okay, we are done for time. Just think about the last 2 questions, which I'm sure we're going to discuss. I'm going to bring us back into the main space here.
Thank you, Dan and team at the Glen Group. And
Thank you to each of you for participating in tonight's event. Very well done to each of you. I know in the sessions I partaked in that there was a lot of great discussion, a lot of good feedback, and thank you for that. I think it'll be very valuable as we move forward. Your ideas and feedback will indeed be instrumental in guiding the vision for Fund Key in this project. Again, I'd like to encourage everyone to send any further ideas or comments you have to the public feedback at stjohn.ca. And this will not be the only opportunity for public input into this project. We will be hosting a similar event in the near future as the design for this project unfolds. So please keep an eye out for future engagement opportunities. Have a great rest of the evening and enjoy the long weekend and keep well. Thank you.
Oh, Brett, okay. Are we going to leave? Is it 7:30 already? Do we have a few?
7:15.
Do we have a few more minutes just to do a recap for those that weren't in all the groups? Could we?
Dan, I think it'd be great if you just did a recap with your team, and that'd be phenomenal. So if you could do that, that'd be wonderful.
Excellent.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is that there was a deep appreciation as felt by some of the presidents that we're going to be focused on placemaking, and that the possibilities look very exciting to be able to imagine that change might look like that. There was some degree of support for buildings that are going to create that front and make the city really stand out, and how important it was going to be able to move down to the water. So the images that showed the terracing of the water and those that also showed the softening with green going down to the water were appreciated. There was a recognition that there's always been a challenge with the public going down and the commercial enterprise, and that the two in the past have not worked seamlessly, and that a better solution is needed for the betterment of all. That there's a need for more activity on the space, not only for people that are coming from cruise ships, but that's important, but for people to want to go to this place and spend more time and have something like a night market or something that would keep people busy going into the evening. There was some hopes that the development at Fundy Key in the shorter term would have some emphasis that wasn't strictly demolished site or surface parking, that there would be something that's pleasant to look at, and that there might be opportunities, things to do. People responded well to the Falls Creek in Vancouver, the way that project embraced the waterfront and the development that's been able to be spun off of bringing people to that area. And there was some also interest in complete activity transportation, segregation, and making sure there's a better integration with the street and the pedestrian or the cyclist or whoever it is that's moving through the site. People are excited to look toward the future. They're looking for this place to be a real gateway into the future, and agree that it's probably time to have a rebrand. So those are sort of our conclusions. Jen, did you have anything different?
Hi, Dan. Okay, you can hear me now, eh?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, surprisingly, there were quite a few comments that were different from your list here. I might repeat a few because I was busy summarizing them, but in general, the feedback that we got in our room was extremely positive and receptive of kind of the direction that we're going and the changes that we're considering making. The biggest thing that was stressed by all of our participants was this improved opening up of the city to the waterfront and the access to and interaction with the water. So that was really stressed by everyone, and the prospect of that is getting everyone really excited. The responses to the overhead headway were pretty much all quite positive. And there's definitely a call for flexibility of the programming. So people talked about some of the opportunities for active as well as passive use of the space, and also flexibility in the size of events, not thinking about where the stage is located currently and the potential of moving that, or but also, you know, not making it so big that there's not the right atmosphere if the space is too big. So having that flexibility. Another thing that was mentioned and resonated with a lot of the people in our group was being cognizant of the 4 seasons we have here and some of the extreme weather, and making sure that the design really functions and provides lots of dynamic opportunities for all seasons. And along that conversation, the idea of an outdoor skating rink or even fire pits was raised, but definitely, you know, we also talked about just small adaptations that can be made throughout the season in the site to extend the use of the space during different weather.
Okay, Jen, we're gonna have to move on now, I think,
Okay.
for the sake of time. Thank you. Nadine, do you have 1 or 2 points that are any different?
I do. There was a lot of similarities with Jen's group. However, in the beginning, in terms of the question of what do we enjoy most about the space, my group really focused quite heavily on the active recreation aspect, especially the volleyball court, walking, all of those kind of things, and really focused on the unusualness of some of those activities. In terms of events, it was similar cultural space, you know, really reflecting St. John and drawing people to the downtown in that way. In terms of what we would propose or which waterfronts to look at, we talked a lot about Baltimore and the public art that you can find there. So having an opportunity for passive and active recreation in a space that is also designed to be an artistic expression that will draw people to the downtown and provide those comfortable environments for recreation. And then in terms of natural elements and green space, we talked a lot about taking inspiration from coastal landscapes, dunes, those kind of environments, so that the plants chosen are very hardy. We had several discussions about you know, waste and how to deal with people walking over those surfaces, and just making sure that they're well maintained.
Okay, fantastic. So folks, we've recorded this session. We've taken minutes. We're going to assemble these, and then we'll be doing, are we still in session here? Yeah, okay. Then I guess I'll be doing an interview on Tuesday morning where we'll summarize the results of this session, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time with some concepts, something visual to look at. So with that, Brent, do you want to close this session? And
yeah, thanks very much,
Okay.
Dan, and thanks again to you and Jen and Nadine, and to everyone participating this evening for taking the time to contribute this excellent feedback that's been provided. And again, I'd encourage everyone to send any further ideas or comments that you have as you reflect upon this evening to the email address that you see here on the screen. And again, this won't be the last opportunity. There will be a future opportunity to again get engaged in the project as it moves forward. So once again, thanks very much, and have a great evening.
Same to you folks. Take care.